Over to you, Rob. It's all yours.
Finally, someone with sense gets to talk here, so this will be nice. Welcome to the Crucible, everyone, the premier debate channel online right now. We got a good one for you tonight. We have Andrew Wilson from the Crucible. We'll be debating Dave Smith, who, for me, most famous this week for shattering Andrew Cuomo's dreams. And
yeah, good job, by the way, Dave. Good job.
If you have not seen it, it's a banger. It's an all-timer. Please check that out. I'm excited. Fans of both of these guys think it's going to be a fantastic debate. They're going to be going on libertarianism. Is it better than Christian populism? I think there's going to be a lot to say. Some agreements, but who likes those? Let's get to disagreements. I think it'll be great. They're going to have 7-minute open.
What's good? I'm going to do a little react on. Going to watch this debate from a few months ago. Andrew Wilson versus Dave Smith. I've already seen it, but I didn't really know who Andrew Wilson was at the time, and now I'm getting into the debates more with the after show carnage, and everyone, I would say probably 75-25, 3 out of 4 people on the after show carnage say that Andrew Wilson destroyed Dave Smith in this debate. That's not how I remember it, but I respect the people who are giving the feedback, so I want to listen to it again. Now that I know Andrew Wilson, I'm in a different place. And let's see who really won. I did a react to a clip of this where I thought Dave Smith had Andrew Wilson on the ropes, but let's go back. I'm going to listen to, it's 3 hours or something. I'm not going to get through all that, but let's just get his vibe from the start.
Openings, which will start with Andrew, and then we'll go into about an hour and 15 minutes of general discussion, followed by some closings. It'll be 7 minutes, and then we're going to get to questions from the audience. So any super chat you put in, we'll try to get to all of those. And then please be watching the moderators in the chat. They're going to give you instructions on how you could call in. So look for the chat, the moderators that'll be talking about that. And we plan on taking a hefty amount of call-ins. So it's going to be a good one. You want to get involved in this, ask either guy a question, make fun of them. We all have thick skin. Just don't make fun of the moderator, I guess. He's perfect. You can't make fun of him. But other than that, looking forward to it. Why don't we just jump in? I don't think either of you really need that much of an introduction. So Andrew is the challenger. You get to go first. You have up to 7 minutes for your opening statement.
None of the current news stories have me too enthralled. So that's why I'm doing this too. Going back to this debate with Andrew Wilson from the Crucible, Dave Smith, part of the problem. Let's go.
Whenever you're ready.
Sure. You guys can hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Dave, for coming into tonight's debate. I appreciate it. I want to let you know the reason I'm having this debate with you is because I think I can bring you to the dark side of the force. And you're already halfway there. My hope is to convince you to get to the rest of the way there. Libertarianism is, in the end, a system which inevitably leads to degeneracy. The reason libertarians currently have a Skittles nominee for president is because the very ideology itself is corrupt. It starts with the very core idea on which all other ideas are based, which is self-ownership. I know this is a doctrine that Mr. Smith does believe, because I have seen him reference it multiple times in multiple appearances, most recently on Reason TV, in his case against open borders. It's a failing dogma because it opens up the ultimate can of worms. If people really do own themselves, then we really can't engage with any voluntary actions they take with each other and stop them, overrule them, or force them not to do those actions. This is exactly why Skittles in society exists. By this logic, we can't outlaw incest, prostitution. We can't outlaw gay marriage. We can't outlaw polygamy. We can't even outlaw unaliving yourself. All things which Christian ethics point to as absolutely immoral. Dave can't really say that they are, though. They have to be allowed if you own yourself, or it would be a violation of the self-ownership doctrine. It's nice and all that Mr. Smith has distanced himself from the failure that is the modern Libertarian Party, and I applaud him for doing it, but ultimately, the very reason he had to is because of this reason. It always leads to the absurd outcome of mass degeneracy. It has to. There's no way around it. Dave assumes, for reasons I don't understand, that his solution of non-promotion yet legalization somehow better than the alternative of the state utilizing authority to remove these moral plagues. I want the state busting up prostitution rings and pimps. I want them arresting incest practitioners, and I want them to arrest polygamists. I want them to use force to prevent unaliving of oneself. The anarcho-capitalist, in this case Dave, can't justify the state really doing any of those things. The Christian ethicist can, striking a key balance between what he would call totalitarianism and what are considered freedoms. For us, though, Mr. Smith has outlined a plan, one he often repeats. His plan is to have libertarians move into positions of governance in order to take control of key systems and then abolish them eventually, in hopes that we eventually get to some kind of anarcho-capitalist society over time. He says this because, quote, the perfect is the enemy of the good. This means, of course, that because a thing isn't perfect doesn't mean we shouldn't move to what's better, even if what's better isn't perfect. So that the audience knows, this is also the exact plan of socialists. They also want to seize government institutions, abolishing power over time in order to end up with a stateless society, just like Dave wants. It's amusing to note that ultimately what both sides are really fighting over is the power of the state and the use of its force. It's hilarious to me that Christians have fallen for any libertarian dogma at all. We have every right to rule as much as the secularists, and the right to wield state power how we see fit to exercise our will, just as the libertarian Mr. Smith wants to do himself, and as the socialists want to do. Mr. Smith definitely can't argue we shouldn't, as if traditional Christians were in power, society would certainly be better than it is now. And, well, if it's not perfect, well, perfection is the enemy of the good. Christian ethics is a superior system of justification, starting points, which reject libertarian axioms, including that of self-ownership, on which the non-aggression principle must base itself. I'd like to see Dave demonstrate for us that self-ownership is true. I'm willing to be convinced, but thus far I most certainly am not. I'd like him to finally clarify his oughts and if incest ought be allowed, if it isn't reproductive, if homosexual marriage ought be allowed, if polygamous marriages ought be allowed, and if unaliving yourself ought be allowed. Anytime in the past I have seen Dave pushed on these ought claims, he's somewhat evasive and dodgy. And I think it's time to get clear positions and note what he actually does want in society, not as preferences go, but as his ought of self-ownership demand people be allowed to do. With no evasion, tell us what is true, that you do believe prostitutes ought to be able to be prostitutes if they want, that those who want to unalive ought to be able to do that, that polygamists ought to be able to marry as many people as they want, that Skittles people ought to be able to get married, that drug use ought to be legal regardless of the drug. I'd like to get into these distinct philosophies. I think that's enough for us to start with. And with that, I'll yield my time to Dave.
Yeah, we're going to have to talk about that, Mr. Wilson. He came out strong. I like how he came out, but I do have some qualms with it. He still came out strong, but I do have a little bit of problems with it. The Skittles, chasing the rainbow, he's talking about Chase Oliver, who won the presidential nominee for the Libertarian Party, and he's like Mayor Pete. He's like a dollar store version of Mayor Pete Buttigieg. He's a Democrat, and you know where that goes. So it was embarrassing for the LP, but that's not an attack on Dave Smith. Dave Smith never supported that guy. He mentioned, this is just off topic a little bit, but unaliving yourself should be illegal. Why should that be illegal? That doesn't make any sense. And then so the big topics, the two big things that I took away from it was that libertarianism will always lead to mass degeneracy and degenerate behavior. And if you want to talk about moral decay, that is a function of culture, not liberty. If your culture is going to become degenerate, it will become degenerate under any circumstances. There is no totalitarianism, there is no authoritarianism that prevents a culture from collapsing due to degenerate behavior. Culture is way more powerful than politics. You cannot force it. And that's what we're seeing now. We don't really have a republic, but we have the facade of one. And whatever you want to call what we have now, it is leading us down the road of degenerate behavior. And we definitely don't have ANCAP liberty. And you could say we don't have any of the basic, we have some of the principles, but we're really living under a tech totalitarian or a technology type based authoritarianism with Elon Musk. He rules damn near everything from space to cars to boring tunnels. And then the other ones are all tech bros too. Do you think we're not going to go down a degenerate path this way? Andrew Wilson's argument is that if you had the right Christian leaders in charge, then they would be the ones to control. Well, if you're going to say that libertarianism goes to depravity and sin, well, what is this? This is an abomination. This is Paula White and the head of Trump's White House faith office. This is your Christian. I present to you Andrew Wilson, and I'm not against him. I'm just arguing against his points here. I'm not saying he lost anything. I'm just saying what my retort to him is that here's your Christian leader.
Strike and 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 strike until you have victory. For every enemy that is aligned against you, let there be that we would strike the ground, for you will give us victory, God. I hear a sound of abundance of rain. I hear a sound of victory. I hear a sound of shouting and singing. I hear a sound of victory. I hear a sound of an abundance of rain. I hear a sound of victory. I hear a sound of an abundance of rain. I hear
what the hell is going on?
The Lord says it is done.
This is not funny to me.
The Lord says it is done.
Okay, it's a little funny.
The Lord says it is done.
Let's go.
For I hear victory,
okay.
victory, victory.
Somebody got to drop a beat to this, then we can have some fun.
In the quarters of heaven, victory, 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 victory.
Okay, okay.
Victory.
I talked myself out the tank. This is lit right here.
Angels are being released right now. Angels are being dispatched right now. Hamanda aka ata raka teda baka sanda ata ambo osa tata rike.
There we go.
For angels have even been dispatched from Africa right now. Africa right now. Africa right now. From Africa right now. They're coming here. They're coming here. In the name of Jesus. From South America. They're coming here. They're coming here. They're coming here. They're coming here. From Africa. From South America. Angelic forces. Angelic reinforcement. Angelic reinforcement. Angelic reinforcement. Pika hata anda ata. Ora bata rata anda eke eke manda rasata. For I hear the sound of victory. 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 I hear the sound of victory.
Okay, shut the okay. Hopefully you understand my point. That's your right now in America. That's your religious leader. And the argument for liberty is if you want that piece of trash to be that money grabbing, fake, blasphemous abomination of a person to be your faith leader, liberty says go ahead and do that. Don't bring that ish anywhere near to me. So my first thing is Andrew Wilson started strong, but I don't think he understands what liberty is. Liberty doesn't mean you get to do a pride parade where Negroes are shaking their whatever in front of children. No. It actually means that stuff wouldn't happen around you unless you wanted it around you, or if you were too weak not to stop it. The way that we have it now, we have to beg for daddy, mommy, state. Can you please stop this degenerate behavior? Under libertarianism, I got my toolie and it's not going to happen here. And we got our community here, and it doesn't matter if I can keep you out of my community if you're just because you're black. No other reason. If you wear a tiny hat, I can keep you out of my community. Why? Because I damn well want to. Or you have slanty eyes or whatever it is. You smell like curry. It doesn't matter why. So people think liberty means you get rolled over. Liberty means anything goes. That ain't the take. Liberty is actually much more regimented than what we have right now. It's just more decentralized. You'll have smaller pockets of people who believe in each other enough to agree on the rules. And you can have open borders in yours. Another one could have closed borders. It could be rich. It could be poor. Everything would be segmented out, almost like the echo chambers we have online. That's not libertarianism, obviously, because they're controlled from above. But say you didn't have anybody controlling from above, and you could foster your own echo chamber. That's basically what liberty would be. Let me get back to the clip. Let's get back to where Comic Dave Smith was about to jump in to the debate
right now.
So why?
I'm messing this up, but let me get back to the debate
Right
where
now.
he was going to jump in.
So why did you?
I don't know why I'm messing this up. Okay, so let's hear. I want to hear where Comic Dave Smith takes it. I don't care if people were saying that he was not prepared for the debate or whatever. I don't know. I thought he did well, but let's hear it.
Distinct philosophies. I think that's enough for us to start with. And with that, I'll yield my time to Dave.
Okay. All right, Dave, whenever you're ready, go ahead. You got up to 7 minutes.
Sure. So as I said, I'll make my opening a bit of a response to yours because I'm just meeting you guys tonight and I didn't exactly know what I was in for. But I will say that I know, Andrew, I have seen on Twitter, you in your bio, you refer to yourself as a paleoconservative. And that I would just say, sorry, were you going to say something? Oh, no, sorry. I would just say that I'm very interested in the re-energizing of that term and that there are people who consider themselves paleoconservatives today. I'm a big, let's just say I was very influenced and I've read a lot of paleoconservative thinkers, Paul Gottfried, Pat Buchanan, Sam Francis, guys like this. One of the things that I think was great about all of those guys was that they all, the term paleoconservative actually came from hearkening back to the old right, which were a group of anti-statist right-wingers back who were, you know, fighting the New Deal and fighting keeping America out of World War I and out of World War II. I would just say in response to some of the things you said there, the idea of libertarianism and self-ownership does not at all imply that anyone is allowed to do whatever they want to do. And it certainly doesn't imply that you can't say something as horrifically immoral, even if it doesn't violate the principle of self-ownership. Certainly property rights would be a great example of where someone wouldn't be allowed to do whatever they want to do if they were on someone else's property who didn't wish to allow them to do that. I think that a lot of the later stuff we'd probably have to get into in the back and forth and when we're asking each other questions. I think there are lots of examples of degeneracy that you could bring up and ask whether I think we ought to be allowed to do them or not. The question to me isn't so much whether we ought to be allowed to do them, it's how society ought to treat them and what exactly has led us to the point where these awful things are so celebrated. So I'm sure there'll be more time to get into all of these things, but I would just say that I think from what I'm hearing at the beginning here, there's a big misunderstanding of what exactly it is I stand for and also what kind of the tradition of resisting centralized authoritarian control is really all about. But I'm happy to talk more about this.
And here's the thing about, I think this is what I'm listening to it again. Dave Smith, one of the reasons I really like Dave Smith is he doesn't go into these debates as this whole, I don't know, who does it? Maybe Vosh, I don't know, Destiny, or this, I've got to win the debate. He's not trying to win a debate. He's trying to have a discussion like a grown-ass man. And so was Andrew Wilson. I'm not saying he's not, but you can see Dave's retort wasn't any type of, they get into a back and forth later on, but it was just more like, let's seek to discover. You're not exactly right. I'm not going to lay it all out here. We'll figure it out as we go.
All right. Opening statement's done. So I'm going to try to stay out of it as much as.
Well, let me talk about paleoconservatism for a little bit. And I think that would describe, that would have a lot of overlap with what, could I call myself what, a nationalist, Christian, original constitutionalist, populist might not go with it, but paleoconservatism is nationalist, America first, socially conservative, anti-intervention. I agree with that 100%. Neoconservative is the opposite, globalist. I mean, this is what, Trump jumps back and forth between these. Trump, when Trump says he wants to take over Greenland, kind of joke about Canada, Mexico. That's globalist behavior. The support for the funny country over there is globalist behavior. That's neocon. That's neocon. That's Trump being a neocon and MAGA being a neocon. Pro-war. They're anti-intervention, not in general, just when it comes to the sunflower country and Pootie Bear, but when it comes to the Middle East, they're pro-war. They're neocons when it comes to the Middle East. So the reason I'm not trying to go down that tangent, just to show you the paleo conservative is the opposite of all that and is anti-interventionist in any state. So if you're a Christian and you say that you've got to protect Israel at all costs, I'm not looking to argue that right now. That's fine. You're not a paleo conservative if you're doing that. Anti-immigration, you would support tariffs like the news. Donald Trump just said that the tariffs are on. I just saw a headline. I didn't read it, but it looks like from the headline I read, can't trust headlines, but it looks like they're back on for, is it Mexico and Canada, 25%? I'm not sure. We'll look it up, but back on for March. And that is definitely a paleo. That's an anti-globalist stance. So you see how everyone jumps in and out of these things. Let's get back to the debate. Andrew Wilson, the Crucible, Dave Smith, part of the problem. Shout out to Robbie, the Fire Bernstein here too.
As possible, we'll let you two go back and forth. You only hear from me if the audience can't hear because there's too much talking over each other. Other than that, got about an hour, 15 hour, 20 minutes. You guys go ahead.
Dave, can you demonstrate for us how you own yourself?
Well, what exactly do you mean by that?
Do you own yourself?
Yes.
Can you demonstrate that?
I mean, I'm demonstrating. We're both demonstrating it right now on this show.
Well, you're not demonstrating that you own yourself.
What do you mean by own?
Well, I think that ownership of a thing is just a social construction. That ownership itself is just a parameter of agreed upon criteria.
Oh, okay, but if you were
hang on, let me finish the point.
Sure.
For which, so that's how we know. So I own that guitar because we agree that I own that guitar. That's it. That's the only reason I own it. I don't think that there's anything which is that you can point to that would demonstrate that this exists outside of a social construction we agree to.
Okay. Well, I'm missing your point here.
My point is that I think it's a social construction when you say that you own yourself. I don't think that
I didn't say it's not a social construction.
Well, then you don't own yourself?
That's a false binary. I'm not. Hold on one second.
Listen. No. That's a law of logic. You either do or you don't.
No, I didn't say. No, you're asking me if I do or I don't. Do you own that guitar?
Yeah.
Okay, but you just said it's a social construct.
Yeah, but I gave you the criteria for the social construct.
Sure, and I said I said I own myself.
Right, but when you say
so, as much as you own that guitar, you've proved
this is
nothing.
Incorrect. When I say, "Do you own yourself?" and you say, "I'm not sure," law of logic.
No.
Hang on, let me finish.
Yes.
Yeah, the law of excluded middle is going to show this. It can only be yes or no. Do you have self-ownership? Yes or no. I own the guitar because we agree we do. Do you only own yourself because we agree you do?
Well, I don't agree that that's what ownership means, but you said yes and I said yes. So we're both exactly even.
Then I want to know how you own yourself.
Well, look, if you actually look up ownership in like a dictionary, I think the definition that you gave would be a little bit different than that. So do I exercise my control over myself? Do I do so morally? Yes, I think so. And I actually think that in order for us to even have this conversation, we both have in a sense agreed to that principle.
I don't think we have.
It's me versus you.
How have we
do you
agreed?
Own the arguments that you're making so far in this
No,
conversation?
you don't. How do you own an argument?
No, I mean, when I say that, I mean, is it yours? Are the words
it came out of my mouth? Sure.
Are the words you're saying yours?
But how would that make the application that I own that thing?
Well, look again. Define own.
I think that the definition of ownership would be a social construct in which you and I, via agreement criteria, decide that X thing becomes property which is assigned to me.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah. This is why. So I'm missing. I'm not understanding Andrew Wilson here, because by his own definition, Andrew has to agree that Dave owns himself. So he needs Andrew's agreement, is what he's saying. I don't understand the where he's going with it.
Yeah. So if that's true,
by that definition, do you own yourself?
I would say by the definition of that social construction, I could say that you own yourself, sure.
Oh, okay.
But that doesn't mean anything. Let me explain why.
Okay.
Because if the
Wait,
social,
what did we just
because
do this whole time?
let
I'm
me
not
explain.
getting it.
Because if the social construction, what if we change the social construct and we decide that you can own a person, Dave?
Right. Okay. And what if we change the social construct and says I own your guitar and I own you? What
Right.
are you?
That's exactly
point?
right. What if we
Okay.
change the social construction of ownership to mean you can own a person? Does that mean that people no longer own themselves?
Well, the difference here, right, is that, and it's the word that I mentioned that you didn't, is that I would say that ownership would imply that you're justified in that claim.
How are you justified in that claim?
How am I justified in the claim of owning myself?
Yeah, you just said if you agreed it's
Okay.
a social construction. So if we agree that it's a social construction, then we can own other people as via social construction. That would be justified.
Well, I don't.
No, that's a different argument to say whether it's justified or not. But still trying to. It looks like Andrew's trying to trap Dave Smith into saying, and Dave did say that it's a social construct. Ownership is a social construct. I have to think about that. So I think what Andrew Wilson's saying is, if ownership is a social construct, then libertarianism can't exist, basically. And then he might be going to a religious argument here. Let's get back to it.
I don't think so. So the major difference there, right, is that as we're having this conversation, and clearly what's the goal here? To persuade, probably not to persuade each other, but at least to persuade the audience who's listening to us, because we recognize that they are in control. Forget the word own, because that's triggering, evidently, but they are
not triggered by the word own.
Yeah, I think where where Andrew wants to take it, and I forget if he does take it here. This has been a while since I watched this, is that really what Christians believe that God owns everything. And Dave is obviously not a Christian. So, and he's Jewish if you don't know. So he's trying to go that route, but I would have just went more direct at it. I don't think he needed, Andrew got a little bit too cute there, but I would have to probably side with Andrew on this one.
Okay. When I say triggering, meaning that's going to start a whole nother debate about semantics. So
yeah, but semantics are important in a debate.
Okay, well, all right. Let's not do this tactic of interrupting every 2 seconds. So let me just finish my point here. So we are both presuming that the people who are listening to this are in control of their own thoughts, and we could potentially persuade them toward our cause. And so if we're doing all of this, we kind of are recognizing in some sense that it's more valuable to persuade people than it is to, I don't know, just enforce our will on them. And so in that sense, I would say that, yes, there is some kind of norm that there's a justifiable path where you can persuade people versus force them.
Sure. Well, I agree that you can persuade all sorts of people and that can be part of a societal norm and that everybody can agree that that's part of a societal norm. Right. That does not demonstrate that you own yourself. Thus, the key principle for the non-aggression principle, which is self-ownership, that's where the violation comes in. Do people own themselves? Is that a justified position or isn't it?
I'm saying that, yes, I think it is. But again,
then can you demonstrate it?
Well, what would you mean by that? What would it?
Yeah, so my position is that God owns everything. I don't own myself from that standpoint, but that doesn't have anything to do with the society that I would want to set up. I can set up a society where I believe God owns everything, but then your neighbor or your same countryman might believe something else. That's the beauty of America, is that you have people of those different beliefs. I do not believe everybody has to. I don't know if there's Christians out there that do. I think the Christian authoritarians know that everybody doesn't believe that, obviously, so they just want to force it upon everyone directly. And I think our society was indirectly built on that. When you look at the Declaration of Independence, it's not in the Constitution. The word God is not in the Constitution, but God was referenced in the Declaration of Independence at least once. So I think I can believe that God owns everything, but I don't Society doesn't necessarily have to be set up that way.
You mean to demonstrate that you own
would
yourself.
you
What
would
do you
have to
mean?
But Andrew Wilson hasn't even brought up that argument yet. I don't remember if he does.
you prove that you own yourself.
That I can control myself, or what? Again, just be clear about what you're asking.
Well, here, let me give you an
Demonstrate-
example.
just
Yeah, I'll
give me
give
an
you
example.
an example to the contrary. I have seen throughout all of human history that human beings seem to be able to own other human beings without much
Sure.
problem. That doesn't seem to be a problem
See,
as
I
long as
don't-
the social construction.
See, it's just kind of hard because, yeah, I know what you mean. Like if you put somebody in chains, you kind of own them. But in the grand scheme of things, humans own nothing.
of ownership of the time states
We're just vessels. If you're a Christian, Christians believe that humans are just we're here to follow God's will. God is the owner. I can pretend like I put a chain on somebody else, but that doesn't really make me the owner of somebody else. That's the belief. That's literally the belief in a higher power.
that you can own another person, you seem to be able to just fine.
Right.
So this axiom of self-ownership is not obvious to me. To be an axiom, it has to be
So what
self-apparent and
demonstrate- hold on.
self-obvious.
So what demonstrated that people owned other people throughout time? Prove that to me.
Yeah,
The same way you just said to me, prove to me that
but I
own
did.
myself.
But I did.
No. Hold on.
I'll prove
One
it to you
second.
again.
Well, hold on. Let's try to not. We're only a couple minutes.
You
into this, so let's-
interrupted me. I didn't interrupt you.
Well, hold on. You just asked me to prove that I own myself, and then you asserted that throughout history people owned other people. So prove that.
Yeah, but we already did. And let me
See, this is where I think the Andrew Wilson people, as far as who I agree with, is Andrew Wilson. But right now, to me, Dave is winning this part because Andrew didn't answer the question. I don't think he does because he knows he can't answer it without Dave saying, well, I'm going to use the same argument.
explain how. You and I already agreed that ownership is a social construction, and that throughout history, the social construction had changed where people were able to own other people via the social construct. So whatever the social construct is of the day, that's all it is. As long as you agree that ownership is a social construction, you basically have to bite that bullet, right?
Wait, no, I'm not even understanding what you're saying here.
Once you say something is a social construction, it doesn't exist. So I don't know. Am I missing something? Just like when you say race is a social construction, that's why I said I'm not black then. Because whatever, it's a social construction, right? So it has nothing to do with skin color. It doesn't matter if you're white, light, whatever, you can identify as black. That's what it means. Social construction means it's not really defined. It's like whatever society agrees upon. If society agrees that this thing is black, then it's black. Or whatever the argument is. So I think Dave Smith has him here. Andrew Wilson just should have been more direct. I think he's being too coy here.
So we agreed it was a social construct, and then your next statement after that was prove to me that you own
Yeah,
yourself.
a social construction
So-
doesn't exist in objective reality.
Right.
It's
So
a
you said
term.
prove-
Yeah.
prove to me that anyone.
And that's cool. They should be. They're grown-ass men. They're very respectful with debates. This is like men talking. Like this isn't some high schooler or I like Luke Beasley. Don't get me wrong, but it's not like Luke Beasley or some of these other. It's Vosh even or Destiny. Angel Berber says after Show Carnage, after this debate, Dave and Andrew are really cool with each other and have had a chill stream with each other. So don't worry about how intense this debate gets. Yeah, I've seen that. I didn't know about the chill stream, but yeah, that's cool. Just like Dave debated young Nick a while back. This is like probably 3 years ago now. And they came away from the debate with, I thought, mutual respect still to this day, even though there was a little bit of disagreement over the last year. And I say, I want to see, this is great to have Dave sit down with Andrew Wilson instead of all these boring Middle East debates. I mean, they were good at first, but they bring up the same topics because it's the same debate every time. Dave Smith versus Laura Loomer, or this person against the Middle East and Prager. And it's like the same arguments. I am so tired of the Middle East debates. And there's really no winner in those things. I mean, you can go back to BC on that. So I like to see this. And then I want to see Dave Smith have a conversation with Nick. That's what I want to see next. That'd be the closest he could have with this. And Nick is another, to me, as much as I like Andrew Wilson, Nick is on another level. Let's get back to the clip. Jordan Lott, we're big Dave Smith fans in here, Dave Smith. And you see, he did such a good job. He's not trying to even really throw haymakers. He's trying to figure things out. What's up, Jordan Lott? Libertarians in the building.
Never owned someone else throughout history, and all you said was it was a social construct.
You mean
as well.
you mean like a contract of ownership between slaves or something?
No, it's your question, so you tell me how.
Yeah,
to
my
answer it.
my claim is that ownership is a social construction. Do you agree or
What does that
disagree with that
mean?
claim?
I think it is a social construct, but
Okay.
there also can be ethical and non-ethical or moral and immoral.
Well, then if
forms
you
of
make the
ownership.
assertion that it's anything more than a social construction, then the burden of claim is on you to demonstrate how it could be.
Well, okay. I mean, again, you're dodging my question here. I asked you the same question you asked me, and you
Yep.
weren't able to
Yes,
answer
he
it either.
is.
I
Part
did
of the
answer it.
reason, by the way, part of the
Nope.
reason why I asked is because I don't exactly understand the question you're asking me. Are you asking me to say why I think, how I could prove that it is moral that one person should own themselves?
How good would presidential debates be if they just talked like this? No, none of those stupid, goofy ass questions interrupting. Just get them in the room and you both talk and we'll just watch.
Rather than
No.
someone else own them? Is that
That's
the
not
question?
that's not the question. The question. So here's the question. Let me explain it to you.
Okay.
The non-aggression principle itself revolves around the idea that human beings own themselves. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So the thing is that you and
didn't
I
realize-
can agree.
I didn't realize that. I'm not a libertarian expert, but I need to look that up. Is that part of the NAP? Is that like the core belief of the NAP? It is a part of the non-aggression principle, self-ownership. It's probably going to be obvious that it says, yes, self-ownership is a fundamental principle of the non-aggression principle. The NAP asserts that initiating force, fraud, or coercion against others is inherently unjust. The principle is rooted in the idea that individuals own themselves. I don't understand. Meaning they have ultimate authority over their bodies, labor, and property derived from voluntary exchange. Without self-ownership, the NAP wouldn't have a clear ethical basis. If individuals do not own themselves, then the prohibition against aggression becomes arbitrary because aggression would not necessarily be a violation of one's rightful control over their own person. Okay, let's just take the God part out of it, and I understand what they're talking about with self-ownership. So, self-ownership, that just seems, what is that? Why do I need to have self-ownership? I am myself. I don't understand that. I don't understand. And maybe I'm just being really rudimentarily, dense and stupid here, but why do I need to say I own my fingers? I need to just declare that? I mean, even if somebody puts me in chains, I own I am myself. I don't know. I'm not going to waste time thinking through that right now, but I'm struggling.
Agree that there's been tons and tons of slavery throughout human history, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So those people clearly own these other people. So this has to be a social construction of agreement.
So is that really, I know it's hard for me to take it out of the religious. Do I agree that if somebody puts me in a cage that they own me? I don't agree with that. I know they're dominating me. What does that mean that they own me? I am me. They can't own me. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's semantics.
Is what is ownership. We agree that you own it, therefore you own it. What I'm asking for is some type of justified evidence that that is not the case and that there is some moral ought or some type of demonstration, philosophically or otherwise, that a human being actually owns themselves.
Okay, so just to be clear here, if I were to say, if you're saying ownership meaning just strictly control over who has something,
that's different. That's what I look at. Yeah, you might have control over me because I'm in shackles and I'm in a cage. Yeah, maybe I don't think it's semantics. I think it's an important distinction. You can do whatever you want, but you don't own me.
And yes, there have been lots of times where people can come just take all your stuff and then claim they own it. And if you're saying the law recognizes it or the society recognizes it, then essentially they own it. So
they can do that with people too, right?
Right. And in a sense, I agree with you. And that
so then you don't own yourself.
Okay, let's just
Let
get
me
to
just
where you're
finish what
going.
I'm saying.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. I mean, dude, we got a long show here, so let's just let each other talk. So in a sense, I agree with you. Yes, you can take possession of something. I don't think anybody is arguing that, and I don't think it's a very impressive point to
I
make.
agree.
That, yes, people can take possession of something.
Guys, I think Dave won. This is the first major argument after the opening. Andrew Wilson had a better opening. I think Dave wins this argument here, even though I agree from the religious standpoint, Andrew didn't even make that point. So we're 20 minutes in, and right now I think Dave is ahead.
And that could be codified by law or society. What we're talking about is something slightly different, which is justified ownership over something. So
Right.
then the claim is like whether it's morally right that you own this or not. Fair enough. And I'm sure there's lots.
I'm just
of
looking
areas,
for the demonstration of what is morally right. Sure.
Sure. Well, okay. If you're looking for the demonstration of what is morally right, I'm sure there's lots of areas where you would believe something is morally right and something else is wrong. And the demonstration of it would be what? That this is what you believe. This is what seems to be right and wrong. This is what has been accepted. And
no, my justification would be divine command, not seemings
Okay,
or
there we
phenomenal
go.
conservatism,
okay,
which is what
sure.
seemings are.
So
Here we go.
okay, but so divine command. So what? And how would you exactly determine what is and isn't divine command?
Well, let's assume for a second that I was, I don't know, like delirious, right? And just thought I talked to God and he gave me commands, right? If it's just preference, if we're just going off of preference, just things which Dave prefers are true, and Dave just prefers that you own yourself because he does, then any preference that I came up with in this delirious state where God was speaking directly to me would be just as valid as whatever preferences that you just axiomatically come to because you just want them to be true. My claim here is that libertarianism at its foundation, at its fundamental foundation, is flawed because this axiom of self-ownership isn't actually true, but rather a social construction which is asserted as though it is a truism when it clearly is not. So it's a fundamental flaw. The reason that you guys come up with such absurd conclusions like that prostitution ought to be legal and all these other things is, and by the way, Dave, you have to end up with that. Otherwise, people don't own themselves. Do you think this?
That's not true. That's not true at all. You can say, so if we had libertarianism, see, Andrew Andrew and the Andrew audience does not understand libertarianism. And I learned it from Comic Dave Smith. And, he's much more well-read than me and all that. But I learned it from him and formed my ideals on it through him mostly and other libertarians. But just because you have liberty does not mean prostitution would be legal in all areas. Just simple, since we already have the states as territories, we already are kind of going through some of that where one state would believe one thing and the other territory would believe something else. You would have prostitution would be legal in California and maybe it wouldn't be legal in Iowa. So no, libertarianism does not mean prostitution has to be legal. It means you get to live in an area where you believe it's legal or not. You don't have a central authority. I mean, you're going to always have politics, but you don't have it to the level that we have in the United States where there's federal laws and stuff like that.
States should come in and stop your brother from unaliving himself, for instance. Do you think that they should do that?
Well, all right. Stick with your point that you were making at first, because you're just jumping all around here.
Well, no,
I'm the first thing you were saying.
Well, I already
there.
gave you the point. I'm saying I reject your axiom. I reject the axiom of self-ownership until otherwise demonstrated. That's my point.
Okay, so what would you, so you're saying that if I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand the first part that you're saying here because I'm not getting it at all. So you're saying if somebody hallucinated that something was right and wrong and it was horrifically not right and wrong, that somehow that disproves the idea that anything is right or wrong?
If it's only axiomatic and based on preference, it would be just as valid. So how do you
determine if anything is morally right or wrong?
If it's from a preference base, you couldn't.
Okay, so how do you determine that anything is morally right or wrong?
I do it from divine command. You do it from preference. I'm
no,
meeting
you do it from
at.
Divine command. What does that mean? Explain that.
So this means that I follow Christian ethics. I use transcendental categories inside of philosophy to create justifications for the values which come from God's laws. That's
yeah. See, but here's the problem. You and I would probably align very closely with Andrew Wilson on that, and we'll come back to 2316. But here's Pastor Greg Locke on X. He purports himself to be a Christian. How you feel about this, Christians?
Hey guys, Pastor Greg Locke here. Die on. Hey guys, Pastor Greg Locke here. Let me be very plain in this quick video and say it doesn't matter how much you bully me about my stand on Israel. I don't care how much you threaten me, how much you accuse me. You can say anything you jolly well please. It will not move me. It will only embolden me. Please know when I say I stand for the Jewish people, I stand for the state of Israel, I stand where God stands. If you bless Israel, you will be blessed. If you curse Israel, you will be cursed. If you don't believe that, then you don't believe the Bible. Bible-believing Christians stand with the people of God. So I stand with Israel. I'm not going to change my stand. I'm not going to back up, pack up, slack up, or shut up. You're not going to bully me into a corner, and I'm not going to give in on this issue. This is a hill that I am willing to die on. Do you understand? So yes, I unapologetically 1000% stand with Israel and with the Jewish people. If that chaps your hide, you'll have to get over it, because I am not going to change my mind.
So that's a pastor who believes he's a Christian and believes that Israel should turn everybody else in the world
So why did you
into their bitch. So I'm not enthralled, Andrew Wilson, about your definition. Like I'm a Christian as well. I think we align. Liberty says, oh, Andrew Wilson and we probably, I mean, he's way more knowledgeable than I am, but just say hypothetically, we align on our version of society, whether it's authoritarian or not, within our own region, Christian, then go do you. And Greg Lott, leave me the hell alone. Go do you. And Dave Smith, you go do you. So I'm not, Andrew Wilson is not resonating with me here.
Isn't an objective value. If we start with it just being a subjective value, then who cares? We never need to go any further than that. Just never need to go any further for justification. So what I've determined is that your values here in libertarianism are subjective value based. Therefore, there's never a reason for me to justify anything objectively to you, because any subjective preference I have,
Andrew,
is just as valid.
You're not answering my question at
literally,
all.
that's the most precise answer.
No, he is not. Andrew's being purposely, he knows where the next move is if he answers the question, so he's not answering it. Let's go to Angel Barber. Thank you again. Says, on the Chill Hangout stream, which was after this, I'll probably have to do a react to that, find where that was. I think that was on Dave's channel, wasn't it? I might have seen a thumbnail on it. They did with each other. They had a great convo about communism, socialism, and occultism. Occultistism. Rob Noor, I don't know how to pronounce his name, the guy right here. The moderator in this debate is one of the best political debaters. Yeah, I know. I don't know much about him. He was on Tim Pool one day, right? That was the one where there was a crash out with him and, dang, I forget the other guy who was anti Funny Country, I believe. He was on there with him, and yeah, he's a beast debater, at least from what I've seen there.
Answer you could ever get.
Andrew,
if you're a
how do you determine if
I
something
just
is
told
right or
you
wrong?
through divine command.
And then I asked you what that means, and you said
I just
nothing.
explained.
No, you didn't.
Yeah,
you
I
just
did.
said that you think my basis is
Okay,
subjective.
fine, Dave. I'll make it
What's
super
yours?
simple, because God tells me so. Is that better for you?
Sure. No,
Okay.
that's the answer. That's
the answer.
Okay.
God tells me
God
so.
tells you,
Yeah.
like, and through what means does God tell you this?
He directly communicates right into my brain. He's like, that shit's wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, but okay. So, so just to be clear, the point of that is that
That's no different than anything else, guys. And if he said, I know he's kind of being facetious there, but if God tells you in your brain just because of you believe the Bible or whatever the thing is that is no different than somebody else saying, I just feel it that way. It's just not. One is not better than the other.
Andrew, it sounds very good when you attack someone and say that's subjective, but when your response to that is God communicates directly into my brain,
Mhm.
that also, I mean, I don't know what the word is for that.
Subjective.
But
It would be
subjective
subjective.
would probably be the word.
But that's my whole point. That's how I'm granting your entire argument. It's like it doesn't matter ultimately objectively.
But your counter is also subjective. So
right. So then that means that my preference is no worse than your own preference.
Well, I mean, no, it means by your argument, we're even.
Yeah. If I'm using preference-based, if I'm using preference-based arguments, or I'm sorry, preference-based morality, and you're using preference-based morality,
listen,
then we're equal, Dave.
To be clear, I don't think I am using preference-based morality.
Got it. So can you make justification then?
1 second. Let me try to finish the sentence here. I don't think I am making subjective-based morality, but you accused me of that. And so my response to you is, so what's your objective base? And your response is, God talks to me directly into my head.
Yeah, for the purpose of demonstration.
All right. By the way, God also talks to me in my head. And so,
perfect.
All right, fine.
All right. So if God talks,
own standard,
there you go.
You haven't won anything. By your own standard, we're even.
Guys, Dave's right. I mean, tell me where I'm wrong. Somebody in the chat. Andrew Wilson, people. I'm rewatching this to give it another chance. He lost the ownership debate. The subjectivity debate here he's losing this too. Somebody tell me what I'm missing. What is it? So Andrew Wilson is right about what? But here's the thing. I'm not saying Andrew's even wrong. It's just he hasn't made a point. What's the point that Andrew Wilson has won over Dave Smith at this point? And this is really more from the after show carnage, because I did reacts to them, and everybody's in my channel saying, I really don't even look at it like who won or lost, but from the standpoint of people on the channel doing the comments, I don't see it at this point. Let me just say that. Now, and it's not even that Dave is winning the argument, but I guess I would say that he is. He's not really. Dave is more being on defense at this point. He hasn't really gone offensive.
Here to win it. It's here to demonstrate it, Dave. I want to
try to let's try if we can, because we're only a few minutes into this. Let's try. This got more contentious than I thought it would in the first few minutes. Let's try to just, by the way, because I want to have a good conversation with you, and I've been told by people who I love and trust that you were a guy to have a good conversation.
Yeah, but you keep on evading every question that I have for you.
Oh, all right. I don't think I have, but
let's answer.
Ask me a direct question.
Great.
I'm happy to answer.
Should the state come in and stop your brother from unaliving himself or not, Dave?
No. I
would want them to. Yes.
Yes. Would you want the state to stop?
I don't agree with that. If somebody wants to unalive themselves, that's had nothing to do with me. The problem is if they were going to harm someone else. Other than that, I don't even understand. Well, I'm surprised Dave said that. You would want to intervene as a family member, and the situation we have with the state now. But I don't understand Dave's take there. Did Dave said he wants the state to come in and stop that? What kind of take is that?
Preference-based morality.
No.
You haven't won anything by your own standard. We can, because we're only a few minutes into this. Let's try. This got more contentious.
So I have to back it up because I can't believe he said that.
Try to just, by the way, because I want to have a good conversation with you, and I've been told by people who I love and trust that you were a guy to have a good conversation.
Yeah, but you keep on evading every question that I have for you.
Oh, all right. I don't think I have, but
let's. He said the state, not like a private force.
State come in and stop your brother from unaliving himself or not, Dave?
I would want them to. Yes.
Yes. Would you want the state to stop a man from having sex with his sister if it would lead to a non-reproductive act?
Christ.
No, that's a fair question.
Wait, if it would lead to a non-reproductive act?
Yeah, she has no uterus.
But that was supposed to be worse than if.
Either way, the state shouldn't stop that. Why? I mean, if you're a libertarian, you would never say the state should do anything of that sort.
If it would reproduce?
Yeah, it would be worse. It would be less worse.
I'm just saying that seemed like an unnecessary.
And when you use the state in this type of argument, you're basically saying federal type of stuff. Because at some point, you have a society that makes its own rules. We're not talking about like a localized situation when you use the state.
A caveat to throw on there, but okay. Wait, Jesus Christ! What you're talking about, like a.
So the answer is, if your territory wants it to be illegal, and I would want to live in a territory that wouldn't want that to be illegal, that wouldn't want it to be legal.
Adults or children?
Adults.
Okay, fine. Because for children, obviously, that'd be. Yeah, I guess I would want them to.
Okay, so you want the state to utilize authority.
Well, not just the state. I would want anyone.
Okay, so I don't
anyone
understand.
with the force to do it, or
Great.
anyone with the strength to do it. Sure.
So then those people don't own themselves.
No, I don't think that's the conclusion.
Well, if they own themselves, can you demonstrate what they're doing wrong?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
But that's a very silly and very look, this is a very
Dave's losing this one for me.
Very like a childish interpretation of libertarianism.
You're still not answering the question. You're just prattling.
No. I didn't. I immediately answered the question, and now I'm responding to the point you made. So I immediately said, yes, anyone with the authority to do it, please stop, or the power to do it, please stop. And then I was responding
But Andrew Wilson's point is that's anti-liberty then.
to what you said. So I did answer the question. What I'm saying is that the idea that if you own yourself, and this is the fundamental mistake that you made at the beginning, therefore I can't say anything is immoral, is ridiculous.
So by Dave's argument, then jumping out of an airplane, going skydiving should be illegal then, right? Because of the risk of unliving yourself.
Ridiculous. And not only in the libertarian worldview, but in any worldview, there are lots of things, I'm sure in yours, where there could be things that you don't think are illegal, but you still, or you don't think should be illegal, but you still think are wrong. So that doesn't mean anything. If I think people own themselves, I can't think there's something horribly wrong about this.
That's not the point. So I'll explain again.
Okay, sure. So please.
If you want the state to go in, if a brother is banging his sister and she can't reproduce, I don't
want the state. That has nothing to do with me. I'm surprised. I have a more libertarian. I don't even call myself. I consider myself a libertarian. I like the principles, but I think my take is more libertarian than Dave's here.
Know how you can demonstrate.
Why does reproducing matter in this?
I'm gonna
just go with it, Dave. Who cares? It's not relevant.
I'll explain sure. Why, so that you can't bank on reproduction as being a harm because it could have like some kid who's all fucked up. So
if you want to do that, I'm fine with that. I mean, it had nothing. What does it have to do with me?
I'm just taking that out of the equation.
Okay. I gotcha.
I'm just taking that out of the equation, right? She has no uterus. They can't reproduce, or maybe they're homosexuals, right? And they're just related.
The answer is, it has nothing to do. I don't care.
If they own themselves and they're adults, that is exactly what you would make the argument for gay marriage. They're adults. These adults.
No. Marriage is. If you're talking about marriage, that is being acknowledged by the government. So that's a whole different argument. We shouldn't even need to acknowledge it to the government, period. So I don't. You could say gay relationships. If somebody wants to go do some that I don't care.
Are consenting with each other. Can you actually justify why that's wrong?
Sure.
Then justify why it's wrong.
Well, I can justify why it's wrong. Okay, there's two separate questions here. And this is almost like, I think what you need to pick apart. So look, there's two questions. One is, could I justify someone using force to stop them? And then could I justify why it's wrong? You get where those are two different things?
Yeah, I'm just asking why it's wrong.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah,
but
so let's do that.
Okay. Do you get why those are two different things, though? You get the point I'm making?
Yeah, sure. So can you answer the question now?
Yeah, dude. Listen, man. Do you want to have a decent?
No, Andrew Wilson's fair here, Dave. Answer the question, man. You broke it down. Answer the question.
Here, or do you want to not?
You're still not answering the question.
Andrew Wilson is right. At some point, answer the question, Dave. They're playing the game of chess, and Dave doesn't want to answer. It's just like Andrew Wilson. Andrew Wilson has multiple moments of this, more moments of this than Dave during the debate. But this is one for Dave where he doesn't want to answer the question because he knows he's buying time to think of the answer while he does all this tap dancing.
Okay.
Can you justify why it's actually wrong for two consenting adults?
Yeah. See, the thing is, I am answering the question.
No, you're not.
You're just kind of being a dick and trying to win the debate.
When are you going to answer the question, Dave?
All right, give him a chance.
So is
Andrew.
that actually like? Does anyone
Andrew Wilson knows he has them. And he's like, Dave, answer the question.
listening to this think this makes for like good debate tactics?
Yeah, I do. I actually do. Andrew Wilson is absolutely right here. Answer the question. You still haven't answered the question, Dave. He's stalling. This is like the rope-a-dope almost. Like Muhammad Ali would be on the ropes. Like, shoot, I'm just trying to let me get an answer out before I get
But you
owned
actually
here.
are not like recognizing that there's a difference between these two things. So
I just told you I do.
He did.
Let's leave him.
All right, do you guys want to do this, man? I fucking like honestly, dude. This is just
You've
like,
talked. We've talked way more than I have, Dave. I just want you to answer my question.
It's fair, Dave. Answer the question, man. You still stalling, bro.
Can you justify it or not, bro?
Okay. So anyway, I'll go back to saying, do you guys want to do this? Do you guys want to like do a show
Dave.
here, or like what's the point of this?
You want
I
to? I asked you specifically if you wanted a conversation or a debate. You said a debate. We're debating.
No. I didn't say that. I said we
that.
could do whatever you want to do, dude.
Yeah, so we're doing a debate. So let's not do a meta
but a
conversation.
debate
Just
doesn't
answer the
mean-
question.
A debate doesn't mean you talk over me every time I try to answer.
I
the
just
question.
want you to answer the question.
No. I understand you do, and I was, but you're
Dave,
just
one second.
Dave is like the boxer who got caught with the punch and he's just hugging. And you're like, damn, the fight's getting kind of messed up because he's just hugging. Dave's trying to change this topic.
Here's what we're going to do. Dave can expound here on what he thinks is occurring here in this debate. And then before you come back in, Andrew, we'll give Dave a chance to specifically answer the question that you've asked. So Dave's going to do two things here.
Andrew Wilson doesn't want Dave to stall because these guys are so good. Dave can stall while he thinks of an answer at the same time. He's doing two, like playing the piano and singing or whatever. You can do two things at the same time.
Ask me the question again. I'm sorry.
Can you justify why two consenting adults who are brother and sister having sex is morally wrong?
Yes.
Then do it.
Okay, because I think it's for the same reason you would think. I think it's against nature. It's evil. It just seems horrible. I don't know. Do you have a better answer for why it's wrong?
Well, yes, divine command.
Divine command. Okay, fine. So I also say divine command. That's why it's wrong.
See, that's a fair answer.
Well, but then
There you
this
go.
axiom, then the axiom of self-ownership would be wrong.
No,
How did
it
he?
wouldn't. No,
well,
it wouldn't. And if you had listened to me when I was
That's so
responding
weird,
the first
though.
time, you would understand.
Well, here,
that.
let me now make my argument back.
Yeah,
If they don't own themselves, right? Or if they do own themselves, rather, and they're two consenting adults.
You don't see Dave flustered too much in the debate. I don't understand why he got flustered. He was winning to me the whole time, or doing well at least to tie at least at the very least.
It's just like two homosexuals consenting adults. Why is it actually wrong for them to do that? You say because it seems like it's against nature, which isn't the natural fallacy. Couldn't I just apply that to homosexuals as well and say, well, it seems like it's...
So that's different. I don't think the state should get involved. Andrew Wilson does, and young Nick does. Many people think the state should get involved with whatever kind of fruity activities these people are doing. And I think it's wrong, and I don't think the state should get involved.
It's against nature.
Yeah, sure. Maybe you could.
And do you think so? Your moral oughts are based around just things that gross you out?
No, divine intervention, bro.
Divine command?
Yeah, there you go.
So if it's divine command, then you're going to abandon libertarianism and you're going to come over to Christian ethics, right?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, shoot. I see. Yeah, we're getting into it where we're at least at a tie right now. Andrew Wilson's getting them.
Oh. But I thought you made your justification based on divine command.
So, okay, listen, it's clear that
Great point, dude. You're right. You have divine command, and you're asking me why it's wrong for a brother to fuck a sister. Listen, dude, I know, I don't know anything about you. I don't know why Jacob thought this was going to be a good idea. I know you dominate 20-year-old OnlyFans sluts in debates.
I also dominate 45-year-old comedians in debates. What's your point?
41, motherfucker. And listen, and no, you're really not though. You're asking.
No, actually, this is pretty bad right here. So yeah, yeah, he's getting you right now, Dave.
questions about why it's wrong for a brother to fuck a sister? Oh, okay.
No, but you said divine command. You're basically trying to be funny and repeat what he's saying. But if you do that, then your argument for liberty is pretty much done.
I don't know, because I think it's wrong and yes, awful. And also, do I think that the government, if we're talking about adults, is it being outlawed going to be a great way to regulate that? Probably not.
Why would Dave only say probably not? What is going on? Why would Dave say that? Jordan, are you in the chat? What is going on? Dave's got a, what is this? It's a little, I think he's a little flustered, man. Why would you say, should the state get involved? Probably not. Well, you should be like, hell no, the state shouldn't get involved. Unless you live in a territory that's decided that. So I guess, I don't know. We'll continue on.
What even is your like vision? I mean, this is like the dumbest fucking question to get into like what the role of government ought to be. Yes, you're right. If the FBI is breaking in and stopping 25-year-old and 28-year-old brothers and sisters from having sex with each other, that's okay. But
they do that. Just so you know, they do that right now. Are you opposed to it? They actually arrest people for doing this and they drag them off to jail. And they put them in jail for doing that.
I'm not nearly as aware of this as you are, Andrew, but I'm not going to fight against that law.
Yeah, but here's the thing then. What I don't understand.
I don't agree with that. I don't understand who's being harmed here. I really don't understand. I guess you could say society with a deformed child. That's why Andrew took that off the table. Children get deformed all the time when it's not on purpose. So what is that? No, I don't know about the FBI door knocking on this type of behavior, but I do not support that. I don't know why Dave is. I'm very shocked by that. I guess maybe he's not an ANCAP. There's no way an ANCAP would say that because we're not even talking about a fake society. Andrew Wilson saying right now, do you support the feds door knocking over this type of, obviously crazy behavior? My answer is no, absolutely not. Who's harmed?
And is that if the argument for self-ownership is that consenting adults can do whatever it is they want to do, because their consenting adults are not hurting anybody else, this would be a violation of the non-aggression principle. Why couldn't a brother and a sister engage in this in Dave's libertarian land? Why couldn't they? Why shouldn't they be able to? Honestly.
Sure. Well, why shouldn't they do it is for moral reasons. I suppose you could make an argument that if people really do have freedom, then a grown adults who are related should not be banned by law and should not have a cop bash them over the head with a baton for like having sex with a cousin or something. Okay, but you're taking this to like this weird extreme example where
that happens now.
Oh, sure. Okay. Anyway, so you're taking this to a weird extreme example where, okay, let's take it to the other extreme and say, do you believe that the government should rush into your house anytime you're doing anything where they determine that that's degenerate or not moral or productive? You're smoking a cigarette right now. Is that enough of a reason for someone to come get you? Like, would there be any realm where you would say, maybe the government shouldn't be regulating every inch of what I determine from divine?
Probably the first time Dave has gone on offense. We're at 36 minutes.
Whatever that is moral or immoral.
Yeah. So actually, this makes my point for me. This is great. So the reason that I just go ahead and concede a lot of these points because there's no real reason to fight them. For instance, if you agree with me that the only justification that you can have is that, well, because God told you it's gross, and so therefore you ought to not do it, then this would mean that you agree with me in divine command and should be a Christian ethicist. That's why that's done. That's why I just make it super easy for you to go ahead and agree. And you did. You agreed. Absent. So I'm just going to ask this straight out. Okay. And no, I don't believe in that sort of government overreach. And I can give you my systems and reasons for why that is too under Christian ethics, or Christian ethics, where we both take into account consequence, but also take into account duty. So I'm going to ask this: absent any kind of divine command, God didn't tell you anything, would you say that it's not moral, and can you justify why it's not moral for a brother to hump his sister? Could you do that absent divine command? Like, honest question, Dave. This is super important.
Sure. So I would say this, right?
Without God's command. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I don't know if you take God out of it. I don't even know how to answer that.
I grew up an atheist. Well, I mean, I'm Jewish, but I grew up like not a religious person. It was just, kind of what I was born into. And I was pretty much an atheist for most of my life. And then I had some experiences as I became a young adult that made me think about God and kind of get in touch with him. And then it was really when I had my first child that I really found God. So I would agree with you that, yes, there is something from God that instructs me as to what is right and wrong in this world.
Sure.
However, but before I ever believed in God, yeah, there was just a deep feeling inside of me that would have been very wrong. And I do believe that was always from God. So
okay.
I don't
so
know.
Then absent God.
What that proves.
So then absent God.
There's nothing in this argument.
Yeah. No, it does. It does.
No, it does.
I'm going to explain how.
No,
I'm
it
going to explain
does.
how. Because you're saying that absent God is just your preferences. It's just how you feel.
No,
that's what makes
not
what's
what I
moral
said.
or not moral.
No,
Then what would make it immoral absent God?
See, here's the thing, dude. Andrew, I think you're doing a thing here that a lot of like internet blood sport debaters try to do, which is that you're trying to win before you're actually listening to what I'm saying.
I can steel man the entire thing if you'd like.
Try to listen to what I actually said and grapple with that. What I said was not before I believed in God, it was just subjective. What I said was before I believed in God, I always had this feeling, and what I believe is that was always God. So to steel man, that's a very different thing than what you said. All right?
Sure. So I'll just steel man the position. The position, to make sure I don't get this wrong at all, is that you believe that there was some type of natural law given to you by God before you ever even believed in God, correct?
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Great. So I steel man the position. So to my question, which you didn't actually answer,
sure,
which is this: absent God, if there was no God, could you justify why this would be immoral or not?
Yeah, I don't know that you could. I mean, I think absent God, it's very difficult to arrive at morality.
Right. So absent God, so you're a divine command as well, divine command theorist, just like myself. So if that's true and you're a divine command theorist, and we have now shown how self-ownership leads to absurd conclusions like a brother being able to hump their sister.
No, but I disagree with that. Okay.
Well, okay. Why can't, if you own yourself, why can't you hump your sister if she owns herself, Dave? That makes no sense.
What do you mean by why can't you?
Yeah.
Why can't, if you don't own yourself?
Never mind. I'm seeing how Andrew Wilson got him here. I completely just kind of I usually listen to this stuff while I'm doing dishes or something. So yeah. And I didn't know who Wilson was. And, I'm a big Dave Smith person, so I probably wasn't even giving Andrew the right kind of lens when I was listening to it. Yeah, this has been about 15 minutes where it hasn't been going well for Dave Smith.
Why can't you hump your sister? What does that mean?
Good question. But my point is with the non-aggression principle, the entire axiom.
You're not asking anything, dude.
Yeah, I am.
So let's just say this. And man, I wish you had picked an example that wasn't so fucking uncomfortable to talk about.
It's not.
But
it's
a good example. So you, Andrew, don't own yourself. Why can't you just hump your sister?
You could.
Exactly. So what the hell are you asking? What's the question?
But that goes to my point.
Yeah,
I think that if you actually have self-ownership as something more than an axiom, meaning it's justified.
I think Dave's kind of getting twisted here mentally because he actually made an argument that makes Andrew Wilson's point there.
Somehow that you actually do own yourself. It's not just a social construction. Then you wouldn't be able to hump your sister if you did not own yourself, right?
What do you mean wouldn't be able to?
But if you do own yourself, you can still hump your sister. The point being,
Andrew, do you own yourself?
Under the current paradigm of the social construction, we would say yes.
Okay. But so if you didn't, you wouldn't be able to hump your. I don't get.
No,
your
you still
point.
could, but that is the
Okay,
point.
So that's it. So you still could. So what are you saying?
So let me try again. Just listen to what
Please.
I'm saying, like I just
I'm
did yours.
gonna
In
listen.
fact, maybe you can steel man this for me.
Yes.
Okay,
Maybe
I'll
you,
try.
like I just did for you.
Let me listen.
Yep. And that's actually a technique that you'll see from like therapists or something like that. Hey, if you're arguing with somebody, steel man their argument so you know that you're not arguing against a straw man. Yeah, this is the perfect time to do it.
Okay.
And I'll see if I can.
So my point is that self-ownership is why you should not be allowed to aggress against another person, because they own themselves. Correct?
Okay.
Is that correct? Isn't that the basis of the NAP? You own you, I own me. That's why we cannot aggress against each other, correct?
Sure.
Okay, got it. And yet here we're both talking about using state authority to aggress against people who own themselves, who aren't actually doing anything you can justify as being wrong.
Yep. Dave messed up there. He messed up.
Outside of Christian ethics. And so the thing is that seems to dispel the NAP.
Yep.
Now, can you steel man that back to me?
Okay.
I know.
So you're saying that if we own ourselves, and everybody and an act of aggression would be violating someone else's self-ownership, then it wouldn't be an act of aggression to kill yourself, incest amongst adults, things like that.
Right.
Okay. So
if that's true, and the only moral oughts that we have for why you shouldn't do this is through Christianity.
No, I didn't say. No, by the way, I didn't say Christianity, but you said that. But
okay, fine. God, whatever the justified axiom is for God, for divine command. Okay,
sure.
If that's the only way that we can justify that this is immoral, then the idea that you owning.
It's funny. Dave couldn't say Christianity. Just to be clear, when I say God, it's a little different.
Yourself and two consenting adults owning themselves in anarcho-capitalist land can't be true, because you are willing to use and violate their self-ownership with aggression because you think they're doing something morally wrong, but you can't justify what they're doing that's morally wrong.
No. Okay. So again, this is back what I was trying to say before, that I think there's these two things that need to be separated. So there's the moral application of the initiation of violence, and then there's morality. And they're not exactly the same thing. And so if my neighbor, let's just say, my neighbor is not being a good husband and being a good father. Okay, so like let's say he's just very cold with his children and doesn't pay the bills on time and doesn't work and is lazy and does all types of things that I judge to be morally wrong. Like I think he should be a better father and a better husband. But if I go over there and beat him over the head with a club to make him be a better husband and father, it's not as simple an equation as, was he morally right or wrong? The question is it morally justified for me to enact this force against him in order to make, is that more moral or immoral than his initial sin? So that's the question that you get into when you start talking about government regulating a lot of these things. It's not as simple as you're making it out that, well, if people own themselves, then it has to be morally justified, whatever they do.
Okay, so let's see if we can't parse this out. And again, I'll see if I can't just steel man this with my criticism. So the thing is that I agree. We can look at scales, right? We can say that we can get to absurd conclusions if we were to say that there's no time or place to apply some sort of aggression towards somebody, right? Otherwise, you would aggress on them for anything that you considered some kind of moral failure. And obviously, that's not what either of us are after. Sure. What I'm saying is that if we take it to its logical conclusion, libertarianism, which is what I said in my opening, as a consequence of itself, has to actually lead to degeneracy. And the reason is because of the idea here is that I own me and you own you. And if we consent to the two things we do together and it hurts nobody else, therefore not violating the non-aggression principle, which is the foundation for which this thing, revolves, then how can you make ever a claim against homosexuals getting married or against incest or against any of these things? How can you possibly make that claim? That's the ultimate question.
Okay, so a couple things here. I don't think that's the ultimate question, and I do think that I could make the claim against that in the same way that you could. And I think we already established this, right? That we can both make the claim for the exact same reasons, because we believe in God and we believe in morality and we believe that this is immoral. So we both have the exact same ability to make the claim. But if we're talking about what your more, I think, broader point that you made there, that libertarianism leads to immorality, I think is completely wrong. And I think this is like kind of the most important fundamental miscalculation that a lot of people on the right who reject libertarianism make.
Yes.
The idea that, well, freedom and liberty is really what leads to degeneracy. And that's just not true.
Yep.
And in fact, empirically and logically, we can look at the situation, particularly the situation of the United States of America, and go, look, as the government has grown bigger and bigger, you've seen degeneracy get more and more out of control.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand why there is a movement against degeneracy. I understand we live in a moment right now where I think our society is essentially disintegrating. And
See, we're 47 minutes in. This is where I would have started the debate if I were Dave Smith. He's back on point here.
I think that that's one of the things that, Andrew, you kind of are, I don't know, prominent for pointing out.
Shout out to Broken Traditions in the chat. If he's East Coast, it's early morning. What's up?
Disintegration of values and norms all throughout.
But the reason I
society.
believe that those values and norms are being eroded is because of libertarians and social leftist elites who often will move towards this principle of non-aggression. They just do it in two different ways. The way one, which libertarian does it, is by saying, if I'm not violating you and your non-aggression principle in some way, then you really have no claim to tell me to do anything, and everything is affirmed through private property. The leftist just affirms it the opposite direction, says there's no such thing as private property, but they apply the same principle of, if I'm not hurting anybody, then what's the problem? And so as we dive into what is the non-aggression principle, the non-aggression principle is the principle that if you are not aggressing against somebody else and you own yourself, they cannot aggress against you. So via consent, you cannot utilize the state, Dave, to have them go and break up an incest family who is all consenting with each other and having orgies nightly. You can't do it.
I understand that's your perspective on this, but that has nothing to do with what I'm getting into. So actually what the non-aggression principle implies is that at best, government ought to be severely restricted, and at worst, government ought to not exist at all. Now, as we've had the rise in government, and I mean, look, in the United States of America, just in the last 20 years, in the last 20 plus years, which we could go back a lot further than that, you've had a tremendous growth in the size of government. And what happens as the government gets bigger and bigger is that all of the things that Christians and traditionalists tend to value get undermined. And so this institution of the government that is inherently based on violating the non-aggression principle does its absolute best to replace, take over, and monopolize all of the areas where traditionally family and community had domain. And
yeah,
so
but why would that be problematic if the non-aggression principle logically should be ignored for these moral oughts? That's that is the question.
Well, hold on. That's a separate question. The point I'm making is that it's not an outgrowth of the non-aggression principle. It's an outgrowth of a rejection of the non-aggression principle. That's actually what leads to all of this.
So then if we were to have the non-aggression principle with a shrunken government, are we still going to use the government in order to aggress against consenting adults who want to have incest or not?
As long as a government exists, it will be used to aggress against non-consenting adults. And
great.
Yes.
Then
I don't know.
Yes.
Listen, Andrew, you're trying to obsess over this incest argument. Okay.
It's foundational.
Laws against incest. I'll grant you that. Sure. Fine. Can we move on to any other topic now?
Yeah, but
Can we
it's
move
not
on to
good,
talking about
Dave.
the state of the country as it actually exists?
Yeah, but this is the
pretty
state of the
funny.
country as it
it's
actually
pretty-
exists.
Well, hold on. It's pretty funny because we live under the most powerful centralized government in the history of the world. The biggest organization in the history of the world is the United States of America's federal government in Washington, D.C., spending over $6 trillion
There
a
we go.
year,
Now you're
employing millions of people with the capability of overthrowing regimes all around the world. And instead, the argument we're getting here is, but if there was no government, who would stop an adult brother and sister from fucking? That's kind of goofy, man. It doesn't really have anything to do with
I just want to let you know
we're
that
living
saying
through.
it's kind of goofy isn't an argument. You just said if we scale the government down to its umpteenth point of scale down, as long as there was still a government, you would want them to enforce action via violating the non-aggression principle for your preference. So if there was,
No, that's not what I said.
well, it's an entailment. If the government's really, really, really big and enforce it right now, and then you say, but if it was really, really small, we would still enforce that because you want to have those laws, then regardless of the size of government, the degeneracy is still going to exist, right? And it's still going to need to be enforced against regardless of the size of the government.
Wait, I'm sorry, just can you rephrase the question? What is it exactly you're asking me?
I'm asking you, if we reach anarcho-utopia, we scale the government
I'm
down
not for a utopia, but
okay,
so
but
whatever.
if we reach
What does that mean? He's not for a utopia. Maybe I don't fully understand where Dave Smith is.
anarcho,
I'm surprised he said that.
whatever you want, as the ultimate, right? The government is now
Well, what is his ideal? So for me, if I'm Andrew, I want to figure out what is your ideal government then?
scaled down to the point where it's essentially gone, right?
Mhm.
Would you still want enforcement against this kind of thing? And how could you have enforcement against it without a government?
What against what kind of thing?
Like incest or gay
Okay,
marriage or any
sure.
of these degenerate actions?
Okay, well, I think there's a pretty big gap between incest and gay marriage, but I will say that
What?
Yeah.
I think there's a gap between
What
that.
is it?
But I think they're two different things.
Yeah, they're two different things, but they're the same as far as two consenting adults doing what they want, right?
Yeah, me and you doing this debate are also two consenting adults doing what they want, but
Yeah.
there's a gap between those things. So anyway,
Where is the gap?
What does that have to do? I mean, it
Oh my
logically
God,
tracks that if we got, dude, you can't go on these long rambling diatribes, and I do 4 seconds.
Yeah. Andrew Wilson fans gonna light me up, but that's good. That's why I wanted to listen to it again. This has been now over 25 minutes, probably 30 minutes. Dave Smith has been struggling.
I do 4 seconds, and you go berserk. Just calm down. Let me ask the actual question,
dude. Come on, man. I asked you to clarify your question, and
I'm trying to clarify it so that you
man.
understand it.
But don't act like I'm going on these long rants and you're not talking. I mean,
Well,
come
you
on,
filibuster. You don't say that much, but I'm still willing to engage.
Oh, come on, Andrew. You're
I'm
full of
super
shit, dude. Whatever.
concise. So I'm super concise.
Okay.
I'm going to get right to it, right, so that you understand what I'm saying to you. What I'm asking you is that the enforcement mechanism against this degeneracy, which you consider to be morally wrong, absent a state, are you still going to want an enforcement mechanism against these moral wrongs? You say, no, there's a big difference between incest and homosexual marriage or homosexual sex. However, the truth is
No, there's not.
that both of these things are exactly logically similar when it comes to two consenting adults doing what it is that they want when they want to do it without hurting anybody else. How's that not the case?
Well, again, as I just pointed out, we're also two consenting adults doing what we want without hurting anyone else. But I think that's very different. So I'm just saying that I'm not even saying I support either of those things. I'm saying I see them as
it's not good.
Different.
From Dave,
no,
not good.
The truth is that if we didn't have what we have today, and this is what happens with every very powerful centralized government, is that their biggest enemy becomes the family, the church, the community, because they don't like things that compete with them. If we actually got rid of all of the impediments between that, you would see an enormous return to normalcy in this country. You would see, I mean, look, starting even in the 1930s with Social Security, when you had the government take over the role of will take care of old people when they get older. What you used to have was what? That parents would rely on their children to take care of them when they get older. Once you like remove all of the disincentives toward normalcy and family and community, if the state was to be reduced to the size that you're talking about, no, my concern would not be, do we have federal agents with guns going in to break up incest amongst adults anytime it's happening? I don't even know how you would go about enforcing that.
What about people who just want to transition?
Again, the transitioning stuff is totally a statist product. This is something that's come out of the universities that are essentially government programs that has been perpetuated by the corporate media and
I'm not disputing any of that. Should they be allowed to do it though?
No. Well, that's
no.
Listen,
no.
What? Okay, hold on.
Wait, what?
Let me say this to be clear. Children, absolutely not. You should not be allowed to do that.
I don't agree with that.
Adult,
yeah. If the child has parental consent and a doctor wants to do it, that has nothing to do with me. So I don't understand where Dave is. He's confusing me.
A doctor should lose their license if they were ever to perform a surgery,
but it's voluntary.
Like
yeah, well,
sure,
and they consented.
But a license could also be voluntary, and a medical board could also be voluntary. So what does that mean?
Well, so that's interesting that you bring that up, considering that the AMA was just a large corporate entity that was not government regulated. Did it get government money? Started off as a trade organization, in fact, and what it did was it defamed all other types of medicine, and that was not the government doing that. That was a private institution which was doing that for the purpose Carnegie.
Right.
Another private institution, Carnegie. The thing is that private institutions are just as susceptible to this type of overreach as the government is. Well, now, hang on, let me finish. My turn.
Sure. Go ahead.
So as we dive into this, though, these medical licenses, why would you even need to have a medical license in an anarcho-capitalist system? You wouldn't even need to have one. And the voluntarism then of this man who wants to go in and have this elective surgery done, why would that be a problem? There's no medical licenses, Dave. It's anarcho-capitalism, baby.
Okay, so if you're going to say that the worst case scenario in anarcho-capitalism is that some random man could go in and someone would give him this like surgery, okay, fine, I guess. I think that if you're asking why there would be licenses or why there would be voluntary organizations, because that's what human beings always naturally gravitate toward. But regardless of that, none of that is really the problem. The problem in our society is that this insane shit is being pushed on everyone, and it's being pushed by giant corporations who are connected to the government. It's being pushed by the government class, and most importantly, it's being pushed in the government schools. You know, one of the things, and
it's also being pushed by private institutions and think tanks who go to lobbyists and influence the government.
Let me finish.
Let's leave Dave finish. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So one of the things that I would say to people listening to this, because I hope you guys will like kind of try to internalize this a little bit. Look, this whole shit, all of this insane degeneracy is being pushed by the most powerful people in this country. And it's not as if this just organically arose out of nowhere. And I hope you guys would at least consider the possibility that, look, the government always, by its nature, moves into the areas that were traditionally left for family and community and churches. And even something like educating the kids. This is one of the biggest problems that we have, that the government is in control of it. And why? And what would happen if they weren't? It would fall back into the realm of families and communities and churches. And what do you think would be better? What do you think would be better? This being run by Washington, D.C., or this being run by your local church? That's kind of the point I'm making. And if that means I have to sacrifice the FBI going on hunts for people having incest, I'm willing to make.
Yeah,
that
I mean,
trade.
these are great. These are almost great points, except that you forget, like these institutions like the AMA and this type of thing, which started out, 150 years ago. The government came in. They used to come in with
Yeah, this Andrew Wilson argument here is basically the classic. If there is no big government, then private corporations will become big government.
trust laws and break these things up. And under anarcho-America corporatism, these antitrust laws would not exist. These people would become.
Do you know anything?
Let me finish, Dave.
Okay, I apologize. Go ahead, Andrew.
Okay, so anyway, over and over again, we see what happens when corporations also gain a huge leverage on power when it comes to no check on them from any government entity.
Well, they just become the government. The government is just a business, so they just become the new government.
This was, in fact, the entire point of Franco's Spain and why Mussolini came up with the idea of fascism to begin with, which was that the state needed to stop large trade organizations from swallowing up small trade organizations. That was the point.
All right.
Let me finish, man.
Sorry.
They
I thought you were done.
They recognized that this was an important thing because what ends up happening is corporate power can also become elite and it becomes a government unto itself. Anarcho-capitalism is not going to stop that from happening.
No, it's
and
not.
on top of that, when we're talking about these moral oughts, these moral claims, there's not going to be medical licenses. There's no driver's licenses. There's none of these things which would protect you from this degeneracy, which your libertarian idealism leads us to every time. You can't even tell us why any of these things are wrong to do, Dave.
Well, okay. I already told you, and I have the exact same answer for what you have for why they're wrong. But listen, let me ask you this. Have you, because I know you call yourself a paleocon on Twitter. Are you familiar with like the paleoconservative thinkers? Like
Pat Buchanan's my favorite. Yeah.
Okay. By the way, for anyone listening here, read every Pat Buchanan book you can get your hands on. They're the absolute best. And Paul Godfrey.
I haven't read a lot. I read the one. Didn't he do the one on World War? I think it was World War One.
Too. You really should read him. He's just so good. And Sam Francis and all of these guys, dude. Go read them, and you will understand why this is just not right.
No, it's not, because Pat Buchanan would agree with me. He would say these moral oughts. He would say these moral oughts.
Yeah, I did the audio book of Pat Buchanan. That was actually a recommendation from Cassandra McDonald. The Churchill, Hitler, and the Unnecessary War. Really, great stuff.
Are going to require state enforcement no matter what. That's why he was a paleocon.
Okay, but what Pat Buchanan would not agree with you on is this idea that if there wasn't the government regulating these things, there'd be no reason for anyone to have licenses or something like that. That's just not true, dude. And
who would license them?
Listen, all of these guys, the Pat Buchanan, Paul Gottfried, all of these guys, Sam Francis, they all said that a huge part of their program was a drastic cut in the size and scope of government.
Because they didn't like the military-industrial complex.
No. Not just that. Yes, Andrew, believe me, I know this stuff, so I'm not wrong about this. Yes, they wanted a cut in the military-industrial complex, but not just that. They wanted to destroy the managerial state. That was their entire plan. Paul Gottfried said, and this was his view, which I thought was a perfect way to say it, which I think you should really consider, that he goes, I am strategically a radical libertarian. And he was very clear that he's not a libertarian because he believes in rights in the same sense that I do. Like he was saying, I don't believe in your right to live any degenerate lifestyle that you want to, but I'm strategically a radical libertarian because he recognized that the only way that you could ever return to normalcy, culturally speaking, was to get DC out of the mix. That the centralized federal government cannot be this in control of the way children are raised, the way people are educated, the way people get healthcare and education and housing without it totally perverting the natural
State
order.
And local governments are just as susceptible to these things, Dave, from lobbying and everything else. And you can't stop.
No, they're not.
You can't stop lobbying, and you can't stop people who have the will of saying, I own myself, from demanding that they be able to be represented, demanding that they be able to have lobbying, from demanding that they own themselves. They're consenting.
That has nothing to do with self-ownership, but okay. But
It clearly does, Dave.
Listen, I would highly recommend, instead of you just trying to win this point against me, go read what Paul Gottfried and Pat Buchanan had to say about this. Because
why? I don't understand. Why can't you make their argument, Dave?
No. I can make their
then
argument.
Make it.
I'm just saying. I'm saying, Andrew, you're already in the mode of not trying to hear a point I have to say.
I've heard everything you've said,
bro. Fire back immediately to get the win.
Yeah, I don't agree with you, so I'm arguing with you. That's how that works.
I'm saying, right. Okay, I'm saying that these guys who you call yourself a paleoconservative, the people who were the leading thinkers of paleoconservatism, made these points really well. I'm just trying to say, maybe go get it from a source where you'll actually be able to listen to it from.
I'm listening to it from you right now. I'm arguing with your points because I don't agree with your points. Okay. And when we get to these ought claims of what we ought to do, it seems like you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. You're like, oh, I think doctors should have their medical licenses revoked for doing this bad thing. But if we really looking at what self-ownership would be in anarcho-capitalist land, there wouldn't be these licenses to begin with. I don't really understand why it is.
There could be plenty of licenses.
From who? Who would they be issued by?
Organizations, the same as they are now. What do you mean?
So the organization which issued the license would have some sort of authority and would be able to use force, right?
No, not necessarily, but they would be able to use their own version of, like, someone could be banned from their organization. Are you actually making the kind of like Bastiat thing where you can't separate government from society and that there can't be anything other than there? I mean, look, obviously all of the government involvement aside, but we all know that we were told a couple things not to say before we got on this show, right? Because of the YouTube government. There's lots of different.
Why would you have a problem with YouTube?
That's making Andrew's point.
That's a private organization doing what it wants, Dave.
What are you asking me now?
Why would you have a problem with YouTube? That's a private organization doing what it wants.
You guys, by the way, can you guys see? This is what's frustrating to me. If you could see, I just made a point. It was an excellent point, and then you immediately just
no, not really. Yeah, I'll have to change my stance. I mean, it's been over 40 minutes, and Dave's had a couple good moments in there, but for most of those last 45 minutes has not been good.
Pivot to something else and move the goalpost. So anyway,
it was your point, Dave.
The point I was making was that there can be private organizations that can have their standards also. And then you pivoted to saying, do I support YouTube and what they do? In what context? What do you mean?
No, what you said was we had some TOS or things which would be TOS that we couldn't talk about on this private platform, but you must support private platforms existing because you're an anarcho-capitalist.
No,
so what's the problem? So you don't support private platforms existing?
Listen, man, do you support private restaurants existing?
Sure.
Okay, if they brought you, you ordered a T-bone steak and they brought it to you and it was freezing cold, would you support that because you support private restaurants existing?
No.
Exactly.
What does that have to do with anything?
It proves exactly.
But you believe that the restaurant should have the right. Wait, Dave. You believe
something existing doesn't mean you
that's super weird, Dave.
do.
So you don't believe that restaurants should have the right to serve you a cold steak?
No, I do.
Well, then what are you talking about, Dave?
Did you honestly not get that?
I
didn't honestly get that. No, it made no sense.
All right.
Well, listen. What
Dave is, you, dude.
What Dave is saying is, I don't support you doing that. But what Andrew is saying, but do you support the right of a private organization to make their own choices? To which I believe Dave's answer is, yeah, they could make that choice, but I personally don't like that choice. I'm not in support of that choice. But I think Andrew, the point he's making is, yeah, but if you had an anarcho-capitalist society, these bad organizations would exist and they would do bad things. And you would have to say they're allowed to do it.
Well, okay, fine. If you want to say, oh, if we had an anarcho-capitalist society, this thing in my head would happen and it could be really bad, whatever. I'm not going to sit here and even argue about that stuff. Okay, fine. I'm talking about, how about in the real world? We live under the biggest government in the history of the world, and look what it's led to. Let's talk about the world we actually live in.
Okay, let's talk about the world that we actually live in. It's my belief that the leftist paradigm, which is a libertarian paradigm of the non-aggression principle, is how leftists are able to control inside of this ginormous government apparatus, which they're continuously expanding. I think that they utilize victim classes like LGBTQ and others and say if they're not hurting anybody, then what's the problem? Libertarians have no way to counteract this because they can't justify why it would be a problem either. So what they end up doing is saying, well, we can't really say shit, can we? We can't really tell you that gays can't be married. We can't really tell you not to expand victim classes. We can't really tell you any of these things because ultimately you believe in the same principle that they do, which is do whatever the fuck you want as long as you're not hurting anybody, man. The good is the good, man. We'll smoke the dope,
so
man.
All of this is that's just
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Dave because Dave is to my knowledge, Dave is anti-Civil Rights Act. So he should be able to, counter that point very easily.
completely ridiculous. I think that libertarianism, if you follow it to its logical conclusion, would tell you that the Civil Rights Act was not justified, would tell you that government funding all of these universities is not justified, would tell you that all of this stuff, like, I mean, it would tear down the entire thing.
Wait, it would tell you slavery wasn't, or abolishing slavery wasn't justified?
What?
Would it tell you that abolishing slavery wasn't
what does
justified?
that have to do with what I just said?
Because that was an act of government, right?
Wait, hold on. But what does that have to do with what I just
Because
said?
when you're talking about civil rights, we're still going back to self-ownership.
The Civil Rights Act has nothing to do with slavery, dude.
No, but it has to do with self-ownership. And pre-Civil Rights Act, there were slaves, right?
No.
Yeah, there wasn't?
When did you think the Civil Rights Act
No, he's not saying right.
happened?
The Civil Rights Act happened during the Jim Crow era. But what I'm talking about with slavery specifically is, did they have
100 years before the Civil Rights Act?
Yes. Did they have right to self-ownership?
Anyway, yes, slaves had a right to not be slaves. But anyway, the point that I'm
Wait, what?
making is that
then we have logical extensions here, then, Dave, that we have to contend with.
We have
Okay, leave Dave finish his point.
All right, Andrew, whatever, dude. All right, listen, the point that I'm making is to just say that what's happening in a college campus, which is essentially a government program, I mean, all of these colleges, whether they're like state schools or whether they just had all of their loans, guaranteed by the federal government or directly given out by the federal government. It's a big, giant government program. And the idea that they would ever sustain themselves in a market is ridiculous. And the fact that there are young people in those groups now want to identify as not the gender that they were born in has nothing to do with the non-aggression principle or self-ownership or anything about liberty.
How does it not have to do with
philosophy on government?
Yeah, it does. It does. That's
No,
bullshit.
it doesn't at all. Doesn't at all.
Yeah,
dude.
not only that,
does.
but I've been demonstrating it over and over, and you have no defense from it. If you own yourself, why can't you choose your gender? Why can't you get your appendages cut off? Why can't you do these things, Dave? Why shouldn't you be?
Damn, it's tough. This is tough to watch, man. I got the chat was right, so that's why I wanted to, when you're getting a lot of feedback of the same type of feedback, then it's time to just kind of reset and say, wait a second, that's not how I remembered it. That's not how I thought about it. I mean, this can happen as far as perception, anything. You're getting that feedback. You gotta pause. So I will admit the chat was absolutely right. I mean, we're hour 11 in, and Andrew Wilson has pretty much, 3/4 of this debate dominated.
Be able to.
Wait, if you don't own yours, listen, this is the thing I think you're not understanding, Andrew. I don't even get what you're saying here. If you don't own yourself,
which I don't think you do.
Right. Okay. Why shouldn't you be able to get your
That's my whole principle. Is it because there is no actual self-ownership?
Okay. So okay.
But Dave, then if you're saying you're going down the route of authoritarianism, you're making Andrew's point.
I'm saying if
That's
you're
a
right.
non sequitur, Dave. It makes no sense.
Oh my God.
Okay.
What's a non sequitur, Andrew?
The
What did you
sequitur
just
is
say was a
saying,
non-sequitur?
what if you don't own yourself? You can do those things too. It has nothing to do with whether you do or not.
Right, but you said, what if you do own yourself? And I'm saying, but what if you don't? So that's the point.
Yeah, what does that have to do with it?
If you don't, then you're supporting Christian authoritarianism, Dave.
That's the non sequitur.
If I may, I think that there's two ships passing here.
Right.
I think that the argument that Dave's making is this: if we decrease the size of the federal government and the government in general, as if he's suggesting, culturally, there wouldn't be the sort of brainwashing that's going on through those organizations that make these things a problem.
No, and then Andrew's saying, no, that's not true. Then business will just fill that void.
Andrew's saying, though, he's saying, but the principle of if you own yourself, you could do whatever you want is foundational to a lot of these egregious behaviors that we would see. And so even if we shrunk the size of government, if we did so based on the mentality of, well, you could do whatever you want as long as it's agreed upon by consenting adults, we would see a lot of behavior that he finds to be undesirable or grotesque or sins, such as incest, homosexual relationships, etc.
Oh, all right. Let me ask you this. So I think we could probably all agree that between, let's just say in the last 100 years, okay, the size and scope of government in this country has grown enormously. Obviously, if you are familiar with the paleo-conservatives, they were, hearkening back to the old conservatives who fought the New Deal back in the 1930s. And I could go back a little bit further than that to Woodrow Wilson creating the central bank and the income tax. But you have the New Deal, you have the expansions of government in World War II, the expansions post-World War II with the creation of the CIA and all of that stuff, the national security apparatus, the global empire. You have the Great Society in the 1960s. You have, I don't know, you fast forward to George W. Bush creating the Department of Homeland Security and the war on terrorism and Barack Obama and all this stuff. Do we have more degeneracy now or then? Does it seem like the growth of government
but that's a correlate. If I could point to you where there's large...
I'm just asking, but I'm asking, so is there any correlation or any causation
there's some correlation, and I'll grant that there's some correlation, but I can also point to large government apparatuses where the state is entirely in control, where there's no degeneracy because you just face the wall in those governments, right? Sure. So the thing is that just correlating that because government has grown in size and degeneracy has also grown in size, it's not a good argument, because I can point to complete authoritarian regimes where there's none of that at all and the government's totally in charge. So the thing is that
so what regimes are you thinking of?
I would guess that like places like North Korea, right? If you engage in degenerate actions, X bad thing happens to you, I would assume. So I'm just saying that the correlate itself is not enough to say that that is the cause. I think that NGOs are also a huge cause of these things, even NGOs which start absent in each.
This is before we found out about the USAID. And and not just that, but it was even through the State Department and all that funding these NGOs.
Type of government movement at all, or massive think tanks which are privately funded. And oftentimes you see what'll happen with like the LGBTQ community and things like this. They create their own independent think tanks and NGOs, which then begin a mass lobbying campaign against morality.
Yep.
And once you have a lobbying campaign against morality, there's no real good reason why you should reduce government, because you can't make good claims for why you should. Just like, why should we do any of this stuff? What happens with these LGBTQ think tanks, especially, they'll even go into Christian churches, things like this. They offer them bags of money to reevaluate the messaging inside of these churches.
Yep.
These are apparatuses which then go and bribe the government. And these are private institutions. They all start as private institutions. The government's not commissioning.
But then they go and bribe the government.
Yeah, but the government. But here's the thing.
Part of it.
But here's the thing. I think that private institutions will always either form a government,
of course,
or make moves to subvert a government, because it's in their best interest to monopolize force.
Yep.
It's in their best interest to do it, just like it's in our best interest as Christians to monopolize the force apparatus of the state as well.
And this is really the reason why I do not call myself a libertarian, even though I like the principles. I like to try to maximize peace, private property ownership, and decentralization, but there is no anarcho utopia doesn't exist, won't exist, can't exist.
If you want to scale back aspects of the state, great. I want to scale back aspects of the state too.
Well,
but that really ultimately has nothing to do.
What aspects do you want to scale back?
Oh, I'd like to scale back, especially social spending when it comes to social safety nets. I'd like to scale back a lot.
Why would you want to?
So actually, Dave Smith did well. That's actually where I reacted. I don't think. Let me just fast forward. I'm about done, but let me fast forward to the question portion.
Because God had convinced the person to park the truck there. Would you want him to? I
I think that my job is to raise my son well enough that that's not an issue.
Well, let me answer this question there. S. Dude in their super chat said, there's never been a society with 350 million people that didn't have a government. Dave had to concede that there are an infinite number of things ANCAPs can't account for. Most notably, who fills the enforcement positions? It would all be private security. It would be private forces. There's this app that I saw that security that supposedly some women or some people were using as took to the airport, kind of like an Uber, but it was security. Airport security app is what I'm looking for. It's called, let's see if I can find it. It's called, of course, I can't find it. It was all over here it is. Protector. So there's an app called Protector. And let me show you. This is what it would be. This is 1 hour, 51 minutes in, but let me see. Over the last few months, I've been advising Book Protectors, a new app for ordering an on-demand security detail. So basically, you would just rent men with, basically, it would be mostly men with guns. It's an Uber with guns. There was another one from during the pandemic, way back, that I was talking about. I forget what it was called. Similar. Today, they're debuting in Los Angeles and New York City at number 3 in the App Store. If you have a hot date this weekend, pick her up in a Protector. Protector, book armed agents. Here's a peek of how it works. So do you see this person? I'm not going to let the No Doubt go on, even though the song's good. But they just picked this woman up. Point of view, we just ordered bodyguards to pick us up. This woman got 2 bodyguards. They look like Russian bodyguards walking with her in the SUV. Kind of look like you got your own security detail, basically. That's got to be expensive. Man, I don't know how much that app costs, but that's got to be expensive. See what Protector app. Is this a music one or what? Protector app. So it's just no music. Book armed. Let me bring it back. Protector. Book armed protectors in Los Angeles. Armed protectors will be right by. Shoot. Pause this one. They'll be right by your side, ensuring your safety. Our protectors are only active duty or retired law enforcement and military. Black car transportation is included for safe and effortless city travel. So it's basically a black car service with, it looks like you can pick and choose the men or how many men. It's got to be very expensive. And then it says, meet the protectors. How many protectors do you want? Just me. How many protectors do you need? Pick the dress code, business formal. That's dope. That's crazy. So you can roll through how many cars you want in your motorcade. It does make me a little uneasy because I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna get 4 guys with guns to protect me, who's gonna protect me from the 4 guys with the guns I just paid? You know what I mean? That's a precarious situation. If you're in the situation where you just have to hire 4 random Negroes with guns to protect you, who protects you from the 4 random Negroes with guns? I don't know. But he said that's why Dave lost the debate. I do agree. All right, I'm going to end it there. I'm going to be out, get some sleep, but I appreciate everybody. That was an interesting debate. I'm going to have to let everybody know on the After Show Carnage that, David Smith is the homie. There's no beef to Dave Smith, and maybe, just a bad day. He wasn't ready for that. He's been doing so many Middle East debates, even a few months ago. Maybe he wasn't ready for this one, but I will have to admit, Andrew Wilson got him. Got him!
The next clip is ready below. Welcome to After Show Carnage.